Morning, everybody. Today I have a class that we're going to do. It's on the importance of voting, which is always an important subject. It comes up, especially every 4 years. But it's a very important thing to do. We talk about it a lot when we were at program. Just, if you want to register to vote, if you don't want to register to vote, how to vote, where are your polling places. But during these times, it's going to be a much different kind of situation. Governor Newsom has said that for California, everything is going to be mail-in balloting. And with all the issues with the USPS or United States Post Office, people are really pushing people to get, your vote in soon. And so this class is more to kind of go over what voting is and why it's important and why you should register. And the second part will be how to register if you haven't registered to vote. And again, if it's all mail-in balloting, then it can come into your house and they will, basically you can make the choices yourself and talk to your family about it, talk to your family about how they want to vote. But again, it's a personal decision. So, it's up to you. If you like the way things are going, if you like, the way things have been with the current administration, then you should voice your opinion. If you want something different and you want to change, then you should voice your opinion on that as well. But, voting is important. But let's get into it so this is something like why voting is important. This is put out by the National Geographic Society. So these are basically their words. They're not all mine. They're their words. And I won't express any sort of political affiliation from me to you. I want you to vote how you want to vote. But, according to a lot of things, we want to see things from every side of the coin and why voting is important. So, why voting is important. So, voting is your civic duty. This is a pretty common sentiment, especially each November as Election Day approaches. But what does it really mean, and what does it mean for Americans? Let's say for us, the U.S. Americans, because there's South America, there's Central America, there's Northern America. But for U.S. citizens in particular. Now, so I looked up what is your civic duty. What is a civic duty? It's a civic engagement or civic participation in any individual or group activity addressing issues of public concern. Citizens acting alone or together to protect public values or to make a difference in the community are the most common types of civic engagement. Now, what is an example of a civic duty? So there are certain things that you're really required to do. So a civic duty is an action required by law for a citizen to perform. Examples of civic duties include paying taxes, going to school, jury duty, serving as a witness in court, and selective service. But voting is also considered a civic duty. It is your civic duty to vote for what's important. Again, a lot of people put it up to just, it's the president, and that's pretty much it. They're like, that's what I'll vote on. But, you need to vote for, because the president is the federal government. That's the entire United States. That person is going to be running all of that. But your governor, that is also something you vote for, which is going to run all of California. But then you have officials where it comes down to the mayor, which is going to be the person in charge of your city. Now, you get a vote on each of those things based on whether you like the way things are going, and also based on whether you want to change. And the mayor who you vote for, if things haven't gone right in a long time, go out and really do get some information, do some study, and find out who you think is best for this job. But again, it's not just the president. A lot of people just put it up there like, oh, the president controls everything. That's not true at all. There are local people that have local powers. There are state people that have state powers. And then again, there's the federal government, which has federal powers, which are limited. Everything was limited. That's why the people who wrote up the Constitution wanted to make sure that things were limited and states could make their own rights and things such as that. So let's go over a history of voting in the United States. So today, most American citizens over the age of 18 are entitled to vote in federal and state elections, but voting was not always a default right for all Americans. The Constitution, as originally written, did not define specifically who could or could not vote, but it did establish how the new country would vote. So in Article 1 of the Constitution, it determined that members of the Senate and the House of Representatives would both be elected by popular vote. So kind of like high school, but on a really bigger level. Whoever the person was, that was most liked would get in there. The president, however, would be elected not by direct vote, but rather by the Electoral College. And the Electoral College, just like it sounds, is the people that we elected in. So they're the ones who ultimately decide. The Electoral College assigns a number of representatives votes per state, typically based on the state's population. We're in California, so we have a giant population. And this indirect election method was seen as a balance between the popular vote, which is us voting, and using a state's representatives in Congress to elect a president. So it's a combination of the two things. And, it'll get deeper than that. But, so, the popular vote is us. The Electoral College, again, why it's important to vote is because who are you voting into? Who do you believe in to really take that mantle? If you're going to send them to the Electoral College, they're the ones who are going to be voting for what you want and what you feel you need. Because the Constitution did not specifically say who could vote, the question was largely left to the states in the 1800s. In most cases, landowning white men were eligible to vote, while white women, black people, and other disadvantaged groups at the time were excluded from voting, known as disenfranchisement. While no longer explicitly excluded, voter suppression is a problem in many parts of the country, as some politicians try to win re-elections by limiting the number of specific populations of voters, such as African Americans. Now, a lot of this has to do with like redistricting or redlining, and it takes votes away and makes it harder for people to vote. That's why this is such an important vote right now, in that in California, for us, we get a vote from our homes. We don't have to go out to a place to actually vote, but you have to register. If you're not registered, all you got to do is put in your name, your address, and they'll send you out a ballot. But it needs to happen soon. The sooner the better. So it wasn't until the 15th Amendment was passed in 1869 that black men were allowed to vote. But even so, many would-be voters faced artificial hurdles like poll taxes, literacy tests, and other measures meant to discourage them from exercising their voting rights. This would continue until the 24th Amendment in 1964, which eliminated the poll tax, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which ended Jim Crow laws. I do hope that you look into Jim Crow laws. I mean, this is a good self-study sort of thing. Women were denied the vote until 1920, which actually they got the right to vote on Michael's birthday in 1920, when the long efforts of the women's suffrage movement resulted in the 19th Amendment. So finally, women had the right to vote. Again, it took a long time, but it finally happened. But that's kind of the way it goes in countries. People try to limit your rights. Again, so this is why it's your civic duty. If you have the right to vote, then you can really push things to the way you want. You know, a lot of people have the argument was like, well, you know, I don't really know, so I'm not going to vote. But then when people say, well, I don't like the way, you know, this is going, I don't like this, I don't like that, about our state, about my city, about the country, I don't like this, and then I ask them, well, did you vote in the last election? And there's a lot of people, millions of people probably, that just don't decide not to vote. And when people say no, I'm like, well, you didn't even try. You didn't try to help. You didn't vote. You can't really complain about something if you didn't do anything about it. And with voting, you can actually do something about it. And it's a really positive way of getting things done. I mean, it's not like you have to do a ton. You just have to study and figure out what's best for you, your family, and know the person's policies. And again, I am always here. If you have questions about anything, I will answer them when it comes to voting. So we ended at the 19th Amendment. Women in 1920 finally got the right to vote. And, you know, we had been established, I mean, that's like 120 years before women finally got the right to vote. It was white men, basically, that were voting at the time, historically. So with these amendments removing the previous barriers to voting, particularly sex and race, theoretically all American citizens over the age of 21 could vote by the mid-1960s. And, well, see, that's a lot further off. Later, in 1971, the American voting age was lowered to 18, building on the idea that if a person was old enough to serve their country in the military, they should be allowed to vote. Let's see. With these constitutional amendments and legislation like the Voting Rights Act of 1965, this struggle for widespread voting rights evolved from the Founding Fathers era to the late 20th century. So that's kind of the history behind all of it. You know, but we all finally have the right to vote. If you're 18 and living in this country, you're a citizen of this country, and even if you're not, well, actually, no, I think you have to be a citizen. All right. But you have the right to vote. And again, it's your civic duty to go out there, just like jury duty, just like anything, you know, that the government requires of you. This is your civic duty to go out there and vote. I mean, nothing's going to happen if you don't vote. But it's very, very, very important that you do vote. So why your vote matters. If you ever think that just one vote in a sea of millions cannot cannot make much of a difference, consider some of the closest elections in U.S. history. So in 2000, Al Gore narrowly lost the Electoral College vote to George W. Bush. The election came down to a recount in Florida, where Bush had won the popular vote by a small margin that had triggered an automatic recount of the votes in the state. And a Supreme Court case, Bush versus Gore. In the end, Bush won Florida by 0.009% of the votes cast in the state, or 537 votes. That's really small. Florida's big. Had 600 people, more pro Gore voters, gone to the polls in Florida that November, there may have actually been an entirely different president from 2000 to 2008. Now, again, it's not a shot against George W. Bush. He won. They're not saying that anything was terrible, but what they're saying is that you could think that well, my vote doesn't count. But if only it, and I'm sure again, there's more than 600 people that just choose not to vote. If they had voted, it would be a much different case. Depending on what they want. I mean, so some people might have been very happy that people didn't vote. But, it could have changed the entire thing. 600, that's a small number. With how many, I think there's 6 million Americans. So, it's important to vote. To make sure. You don't know what it's going to come down to. If it comes down to California with something, you don't know what it's going to come down to. And if it comes down to a numbers game, then if you don't vote, again, it's something that you could have helped change. And again, it's your civic duty to go. And you don't even have to go out. Right now, it's not even go out to vote. It's stay home and vote. Okay, so let's continue. Sorry, a little tangent. More recently, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 by securing a close electoral college win. So Hillary won the popular vote, but not the electoral college vote. Although the election did not come down to a handful of votes in one state, Trump's votes in the electoral college decided a tight race. Clinton had won the national popular vote by nearly 3 million votes, but the concentration of Trump voters in key districts in swing states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan helped seal enough electoral votes to win the presidency. So, the electoral college works kind of like this. So, like, we all vote. So, the country, is what I mean by we. We, the country of people, voted for Hillary, and she got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump in this last election. But then, see, the states, each state has a certain amount of electoral college votes. So if you're a really small state, you might have one. If you're a big state like California, you have a bunch. If you've got a lot of people like New York, then you have a bunch. But at the same time, those kind of combine together. So each state is very important in the voting process. That's why it continues to be that people go out and they campaign all over the place to make sure that, they're securing votes, as many votes in that state, and get at least one of the delegates of the Electoral College. But again, our vote, though it seems like 3 million votes, that should have counted for something. That's 3 million more votes, and you can still lose an election. But that's even more of a reason why your vote matters. Because, go out and, not go out, sorry, but defend yourself. And defend yourself by voting. Make sure your voice is heard. So your vote may not directly elect the president, but if your vote joins enough others in voting district or country, your vote undoubtedly matters when it comes to electoral results. Most states have a winner-take-all system where the popular vote winner gets the state's electoral votes. There are also local and state elections to consider. While presidential or other national elections usually get a significant voter turnout, local elections are typically decided by a much smaller group of voters. Portland State University study found that fewer than 15% of eligible voters were turning out to vote for mayors, council members, and other local offices. Low turnout means that important local issues are determined by a limited group of voters, making a single vote even more statistically meaningful. So again, it really has to do with you. It's not just the president. There's a lot of local, like you could run for office in a local office, but you'd have to come up with a pretty good campaign. But what is meaningful is that a lot of people have been in that same position for a very long time. And maybe they're not making as much of a change as they could. But if we don't vote on it, if we don't make a change, if we don't look at what other people running have to offer and vote that way, everything's going to stay the same. If that's what you want, then vote that way. If it's not what you want, then vote that way. Yeah, but it's your right to vote. It's your duty to vote. And, I really can't stress it enough that I hope everyone is registered and ready to vote. How can you make your voice heard? So if you're not yet 18 or not a U.S. citizen, you can still participate in an election. Let's find out how. You can still participate in the election process. You may not be able to walk into a voting booth, but there are things you can do to get involved. Number 1, be informed. Read up on political issues, both local and national, and figure out where you stand. Again, local could be just state. It could be your own city, like Contra Costa County, even smaller. Get out and talk to people, even if you can't vote right now. Pardon me. I wouldn't suggest going out. But, again, voting, you can make yourself heard. So even if you cannot vote, you can still voice opinions on social media, in your school or local newspaper, or other public forums. You never know who might be listening. The program does not count as that. We're not there to push our political ideas. You can discuss with your staff and things like that, and what we can do is we can bring it up and move up the ladder. Say, hey, these are things that people are talking about. What should we do about this? How should we handle this? If you have concerns, any concern should always come to us. And because you have lots of friends at program, let us know. And I will always be a voice for you. I will always be allied with you. That's not just my job, that's also my duty. And I enjoy that part of my job very much. Volunteer. If you support a particular candidate, you can work on their campaign by participating in phone banks, doing door-to-door outreach, writing postcards, or volunteering at campaign headquarters. Your work can help get candidates elected, even if you're not able to vote yourself. So again, this is for people who can't vote, but you can also do this as a voter, depending on how safe you feel with everything. So participation in elections is one of the key freedoms of American life. Many people in countries around the world do not have the same freedom, nor did many Americans in centuries past. No matter what you believe or who you support, it is important to exercise your rights. I couldn't say it better. There are still places around the world where people don't have the right to vote. They have no say in anything. You have a say. So say it. And say it proud. Please go out to vote. The second class will be on something where you can learn to plan to vote. But anyway, I'll see you for the second class. Peace.